Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Bank Marketing Show. I'm one of your hosts, Dan Novalis. Also is here with me is Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Dan. How are you today?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing well.
So Chris and I have been chatting, and we were trying to figure out the right topic for this episode, and a bunch going on in the bank world the last few weeks. So yeah, Chris, we were talking here about getting a bit into like crisis communications and the role of that for banks. Obviously, the last few weeks, the Silicon Valley Bank implosion, bank run, kind of rippled its way through, and we're a little bit removed from it now. But I know it's been a big focus for us the last few weeks.
It has been, Dan, and you're right. And thought it was kind of cool that it occurred to you and I to say, hey, this is a big deal, and that this is worthy of topic and conversation for you and I on the show for bank marketers and bank administration and C-suite folks in general, just because crisis communication is so very important. But it's kind of one of those things that we don't really think about, and we don't plan well for it until, oh my gosh, we need it.
Right.
And that's right. And the instigator for this with SVB and all of that happening, you and I probably knew it. That happened on a Friday. You and I knew it over the weekend that Monday was coming, and we communicated directly with our clients, our community bank and credit union clients all over the place that, hey, we're here for you and we're ready. And it turned out not to be a panic mode situation, fortunately. But there were a number of our clients that, said, hey, yeah, we've got to get messaging out there, or we want to post this reassurance on our social or send out this email marketing or whatever the case may be. And that was really, important for them to communicate at that time. And at the same time, Dan, as you and I were talking about and leading up to this, we've talked to some of our clients in a couple of weeks since then that were not prepared from a platform standpoint or from, for various reasons to be able to do that quickly, efficiently, and effectively in communicating with A, their customers, and B, their community.
Right.
And boy, that brought front and center what a big deal it is. Because you and I were kind of joking about it, but I mean, when it's Monday morning, 8:00, it's right now. It is an important message around the banking industry. What are you going to mail them? You're going to call everybody in and start printing and folding letters and mail them? I mean, come on. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's so interesting is how this started, right? Was obviously there's some, structural stuff with the bank, but like ultimately this all started as like a shaking of confidence in the bank on Twitter, and rapidly kind of went from there. And we're not going to get into like breaking that down and what SVB should have done or didn't do or could have done, but like what was so interesting is that it from an outsider, sure, in the bank there was lots going on, but like watching it from the industry but outside perspective, like it happened super quick, and you have to be ready, right? So I was thinking earlier about that adage of like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago.
There you go.
The second best time is today, and I think the same thing kind of applies here with crisis communications. Like the best time to have started to build trust with your customers is years ago.
Absolutely.
The day they, even before they walk in the door, right? If you haven't been doing that, you should start. I mean, as community banks, most of you all have customers that trust you, but really got me thinking about the role of marketing and all this is to build that trust, is to build confidence. You may not always, it may not always be enough. I'm sure SVB had, customers that trusted them, right? So there can always be external forces, but you're in a better spot if you build that trust, you build that confidence, and you're always working at that, right? It's a lot easier to have built it up over time than when a crisis happens to say, oh my gosh, like we need to get a letter out, because it's gonna feel different to your customers after all that happens.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, like all the stuff that the government did after this happened too was designed to build trust back into the system. And banks, I think, can do a lot of those things now.
Dan, that was certainly one very vivid example. And then, unfortunately, we had another one hit much closer to home. 2 weeks following that SVB incident in late March here of 2023 in Mississippi, we had an E4 tornado rip through a couple of the westernmost counties in Mississippi near the river and killed 13 in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, and several more in Anguilla and some other towns and areas, and then kind of hop, skipped, and jumped to a different part further northeast in Mississippi and Amory. And just by happenstance, we have clients of ours in those areas that are community banks. And a couple of things that were quickly apparent around that. First of all, is how much a part of smaller communities like that the hometown community banks really are. Number one, and especially ones that have very significant market share, in some of those counties and more rural and smaller areas. These are communities of 2,000, people, on average. And so, from a number of perspectives, Dan, so when the bank shuts down because the roof was ripped off, at one of their branches, not only is the community suffering in so many ways, but as they start to get back on their feet, can they even do their banking? And so back to our topic today about marketing's role in crisis communications, it's a worst case scenario. It's something that's unimaginable. Yet, fortunately, what they were able to do as soon as they had cell phone coverage again, as horrible as that sounds, and it was, they were able to reach out to us and go, oh, can you get something up on our website? Can you post something on our social? Can you, do this and that? Just so that we're able to try to communicate literally to our communities that we've got a plan. I mean, this was like the day after it happened. We've got a plan to reopen within the next couple of days.
Yeah.
And they literally did that under a tent with a card table, and a cash drawer, Dan, in one of these communities. And it was that badly needed. So, again, that's a worst case and unique scenario. But at the same time, it was very demonstrative about crisis communications, and who you are as a bank and an entity and a lot of that. And because a lot of our audience for the podcast show here, are community banks, or certainly probably all of your bank clients and all of mine and credit union clients at minimum have branches in very small markets. So, how do you instantly and quickly communicate with those? And again, I say it very sarcastically, and I apologize, but what are you going to do? Mail them? No, we need to be able to do this. And then the continuation of that messaging. So to everyone on the podcast that's listening to the show here, what is your crisis communication plan would be my question. And this matters not if you're in downtown St. Louis or Atlanta or Seattle or, small town Mississippi. Well, what's your crisis communication plan? Do you have access to maybe partners, even outside of your immediate system, who can communicate on your behalf?
Yeah.
And those types of things. What is that? What is that plan? So, yeah, Dan. So you said it at the beginning of our show here. This topic is timely for a wide variety of reasons, and the pandemic taught us this. You and I were discussing that. I mean, boy, if any of us have takeaway lessons from the early days of the pandemic, and having to shut down lobbies and go to drive-through only and this, that, and I mean, again, same issue here. If you didn't have crisis communication capabilities, wow, that's tough, right?
Well, and I think the interesting, an interesting extension of that is, I mean, you could sort of generally draw a line between what happened with SVB and COVID, right? I mean, the whole point was the interest rate changes over the past few years, and that sort of led to it, and that all came from inflation that grew out of supply chain disruptions and whatnot coming out of COVID. So there could be other things that come down the pike. There could be a couple podcast episodes ago we were talking about impending recession. There could be lots of other things still coming, and there will be more crises. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is there will be another crisis. I hate to be I mean to be doom and gloom, but there's always going to be more crises, tornadoes, storms, or economic. And no matter what, you need to have a process in place. You and I were talking too about kind of the difference between PR and marketing, right? And PR, a lot of people think about PR like in a crisis. So I need some public relations. I need to have a communication plan, what to do. From a PR perspective, a lot of that stuff you can put into place ahead of time. And like you just said, know what partners to call, have that, the modern version of like the telephone tree of how to get that word out. And look at your area, right? Are you prone to tornadoes? Are you prone to earthquakes? Maybe it makes sense to like have kind of a communication plan in place for specific things like that, so you're ready to go. It's impossible to predict everything. Nobody, probably predicted the biggest bank failures in decades, but to have that plan in place. So that's the PR side, is like, what are we spinning into action like in the moment? But marketing is a tool to build up confidence over time, so that when you have a crisis moment, you've got a baseline level of trust and confidence in you.
And reliability. You keep using the word trust, and that's entirely accurate. And so is reliability.
Trust is just doing things that people expect you to do.
Yeah.
That's the basis of trust. So, I think as a bank, as a cornerstone of your community, people expect you to be there and to be engaging in conversation with them, especially if they're, if you're holding, lots of people's life savings, and, they want to hear from you, right? Not in a salesy way, not in a, apply for a refi every 2 weeks. Like, they don't want to hear that, but they want to be hearing from you in a trusted way. And that's building confidence in you. And when and if there is a crisis, like you have a better leg to stand on, and you can, reach people more quickly. You can message them more directly, and it doesn't feel as reactive, right? If the only time you're reaching out to them is when there is a crisis, it feels very reactive. It's like that friend that, only calls when they learn you've won the lottery.
Yeah.
Something like that, where it's said, it's not really building a relationship. It's not really building trust if the only time they hear from you is when something bad's going on. They know that you're there as the pillar throughout.
Yeah. And you make a valid point too about the difference between marketing and PR. And those of us and everyone listening to the show knows and well understands that often those two are very muddled and very confused.
Right.
And they are quite two different things. I mean, positioning in a PR statement about an issue or a something like that is integrated with, but is not marketing.
Right.
And so as we go through those things, and Dan, here was another example of the types of things where the fact that we are all human enters in, is that one of our very great longtime clients last year unexpectedly lost their marketing director to a heart attack. And she was very well known in the community and just I won't go into all of it, but she was just a very light, warm, big heart spirit, just a great person. And, and a family person, a church person, and just obviously a very tragic circumstance. And, if as an entity at that point, there are lots of decisions to be made and how you handle that and all of that. But to be silent and non-communicative about something that important that your entire community and greater communities and multiple branches, even spilling into other communities, they know that this has happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's kind of one of those, the front page of the small local paper, kind of deal, and everybody knew her in the best way. And what, so what, again, what's the bank going to do? You're going to mail a letter?
Right. Well, and here's a great, here's a great example or a great story. And this is not related to a bank, but my grandmother, who just turned 96, happy birthday.
Wow.
Lives here, and she's in an independent living facility, a big apartment building. And I'm on their newsletter list. And they sent out an email a couple weeks ago that said, "Oh, our chef, who's been the chef of this building for 25 years, our chef is no longer here. We cannot disclose the circumstances of his departure. Immediately, we have promoted, this other person."
Mm-hmm.
And I read it and I'm like, well, there's some drama. Like, what could this possibly mean? Like, what does this chef do? Like, did he steal money? Like, what is going on? And, then I learned the story was like his wife had a major medical problem and he had to immediately leave and tend to her. And that's like heartfelt. I mean, you don't want to put lots of information like that into a letter, but like there's a lesson there for like, if you don't communicate, it just, as people make assumptions, people fill that void with, bad stuff, your human tendency is to think it's bad. Right. Yep. And so the lesson for banks is like, and playing off your story too, is just like, it's proactively communicate this stuff and say, hey, this happened, right? It's not to avoid talking about what happened, but this happened. And, here's how we're dealing with it. That's what builds trust.
And the flip side of that too, Dan, that's a great example, but what happened in this circumstance with this unexpected loss, with this bank client of ours, is what they were able to do was positive communication. I say positive communicate, but what they could do was lifted her up and her community and, all types of things. And there were lots of people that wanted to make donations and support and all those other kind of things. And we were able to help our bank client become the hub for that, which was entirely appropriate and should be. Yet if those crisis communication channels were not in place, the CEO could have called me and gone, "Hey, we want to do this and set up this fund for the school in her name," or all that. And I'd have been like, okay, but how are we going to communicate it?
Right. And then there's dozens of hours of work in figuring that out. And then if you any time that you spend figuring that stuff out is where those assumptions fester, right? So people in the community know about this person's passing and they think, oh my gosh, I can't believe the bank isn't doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Right. And even if you do later, there's still, a little bit of that subconscious kind of brand equity that you're losing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so similarly with, the SVB type of crisis is like, if I look at the banks that we work with, a few of them had reached out directly, to me and said, well, what do we do? Which, we're talking about here of like, we should kind of have a plan in place of like, oh, this is the type of thing we need to communicate A, B, and C, call our top 10% of customers, those types of things, have that kind of plan. And then the other half really just like kind of did nothing. Like we're kind of afraid to say anything. And then they kind of came back later in that week after it happened. I know a lot of like the state associations, suggested like social media posts and suggested wording to their banks. And that's great. But, it was only after that when a few of our other banks kind of said, hey, like, all right, we want to post these things. We want to get these things up. But by then it had been a few days. So like, what if this thing hadn't just been limited to SVB? Like, what if, the government hadn't stepped in as quickly, or, other chatter kind of made worse? Like, I know, I bet every one of our clients got some phone calls.
Oh yeah.
And if they hadn't if they hadn't jumped on it as quickly as they did, things could have been much worse. So,
oh yeah. And the message that so many of our clients were able to communicate, Dan, was a quick explanation that our balance sheet looks nothing like
yeah,
an SVB, high risk, so on and so forth. In fact, it's easy to communicate, as a community bank and as an FDI insured, all these things. And, our balance sheet is structured this kind of way. And FDIC, it has this purpose and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't extremely difficult messaging.
right.
But to be able to get it out there, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, the ones that did that more proactively were the ones that, even where I'm a bystander and a partner, were more reassuring.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to bring up the FDIC bit as well, of like, how do you build, we talked earlier, like, how do you build trust over time? And that's by like educating on what FDIC insurance is. We all know, we all take it for granted because we're in the industry. But I think a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't understand really what that means, right? You see the FDIC logo, you see the, 250K number, but like, I think the vast majority of people don't, also take it for granted and don't really internalize what that means. I mean, the whole point of it is to like help prevent bank runs. But if we can educate our customers and say, hey, like, as a customer of ours, you are covered by this. If you have less than 250K with us, you are covered. If you have more than 250K with us, set up a consultation. Like, offer a consultation proactively. Like, that's the type of stuff you can build trust. And say, if you're over 250K, we will chat with you and figure out how to get you covered.
Right, and explain strategies like stacked accounts and those
stacked accounts.
Those types of things. Yeah,
most banks have some sort of thing, and I know as like a relationship based bank, you, even if you don't, you probably are like, great, we'll help you transfer you have 350K, great. Well, we'll help you like transfer this money around, or put it in a money market, put it in something else where you are covered, or we'll help you like go to a different bank if we had to, because you care about the customer. But that, there's opportunities to create those things, to create those conversations, and proactively reaching out in the best interest of your customers is the type of stuff that builds trust. And frankly too, because of, I mean, in a tactical sense too, we all get tons of email spam a day. We all get, Facebook organic reach is 2% or something ridiculous now. So even putting up a Facebook post about how your balance sheet is different, right? Sending that letter, even if you mail a letter, even if you send an email, there's still going to be people that don't see it. So it's a communication plan is much more than just a one-time, blast. It's, talking about it over time and repeated messages and all the, think about all the places people see it. So, who do you need to call? Who will get a letter? Where do you put it on the website? How often do you refresh the message? Are you putting out social media posts a few times a week for a few weeks? Keeping an eye on the news, and as more bits of the story come out, adapting your posts and your story to it, and just, looking out for your customers, which is what I think everybody listening to this podcast does really well already. But adding that layer of crisis comms to it, never a bad idea.
There you go. And, our topic today being around the role of marketing in crisis communication, I think that in essence, the role of marketing, it can be to plan crisis communications.
Yeah.
And the role of marketing is who has the hands on the wheel with the various platforms, social, email, web, digital, all these, all these channels and platforms and all of those things that if done well, one of our big mantras, Dan, you and I, and on this show is around marketing strategic planning. And that requires being proactive. and predictive and, and ahead of time and designation of roles and budgets and all those other types of things. And in this crisis communications plan and how marketing is your lead, is your knight in shining armor, if you will, when crisis communications are needed, is not that difficult.
Right.
This can be, to you guys listening, these can be a couple of C-suite folks and your marketing folks. And if you have partner agencies like us, this can be done in a quick Zoom meeting,
Right.
And to go, okay, so if this type of thing happens, here's who we call, this is what's going to happen. And this part of the team is going to put graphics and messages together and, this and that. And
yeah. And here's where the messages go. And, here's what we do over the next couple of days. Like, you don't know what those graphics and messages are going to say.
Yeah.
But just by having that plan, it spins into action. And you can, then the CEO of the bank doesn't have to worry about the message or graphic details. It just goes to that person. And maybe the CEO, you can have part of your plan, like the CEO needs to make a statement. Like one of our banks did a really good job of their, CEO wrote a short letter. And then, their plan was, hey, only our CEO or only words from our CEO are going to talk about the SVB deal, right? Those words are going to go to social media. Those words are going to go on the website, but it's got to be this, it's got to be the same words. It's got to come from the CEO. We don't want just like loan officers out on their own Facebook pages pontificating about it. So but what is that plan? They didn't know until that day, like what they were actually going to say. But then what happened is like the CEO can write a letter or work with his team and get the letter out and then go on to, flip gears and actually manage stuff and talk to customers while the rest of the team distributes that stuff. Versus if they didn't have it that morning, they would have been all, huddled together and figuring out the plan and not talking to customers, not getting the message out.
There you go. Well, so I think the takeaway for everyone today, Dan, is take that time, pause, and be intentional and work on your crisis communication strategy. And and utilizing your marketing and your marketing channels as what that is going to be, because one of the only sure things in life is change. So change is going to happen. Circumstances are going to happen. And, hopefully these things have brought to top of mind how crucial and important it is to be able to do this as an entity, and to be able to communicate well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Well, and we'd love to hear from you guys or be a resource to you. So on our website on bankmarketingshow.com, you can reach out to Dan and I. And if you or your team is going, well, hey, we don't even know where to start with this, Dan or I are glad to help and to share ideas and those types of things, regardless of your asset size and your geographic spread and all of that. So we're happy to help. So reach out to us. And Dan, I've got to also drop it's not a shameless promotion. I want to sincerely invite everyone, because on the heels of those tornadoes and the deaths and destruction in Rolling Fork and Amory, Mississippi, and a lot of these other communities, Mississippi Bankers Association, and by intention from Bank of Anguilla and lots of other banks in this area pooled together and have put together an intentional fund and are seeking support and donations that are going straight into those communities in very direct and sure ways. So in our show notes, Dan, I'll post the link to anyone that would be interested in supporting that and being a part of the solution. Because like I said, man, if you don't think that community banks and financial institutions are not the backbone of America and our communities, you're not paying attention. Because this is all demonstrated it very vividly. And so this would be a great way to do that. And we invite everyone to go to our show notes on our website for this episode and jump in and support that.
Yeah. And that's just a great example of community banks being there for their communities and being that pillar that we mentioned. So build that trust and help out other banks when they're in need. Because you never know what could happen in your community.
Very cool. Well, great, Dan. Well, I think we touched on something crucial here today. So I'm glad it came to us to bring it to all of you guys, to our listeners.
Yeah, and great topic today, and hopefully there's some takeaways for everybody listening. So
great. Well, thanks a lot, Dan. Good to be with you again. I know we've got some great guests coming up on several of the next episodes that are going to be really juicy and informational too. So looking forward to what's coming.
Yeah, likewise.
Great.
We'll see you on the next one.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.